From the APT studios here inside the Alabama State House, welcome to Capitol Journal. I'm Randy Scott in for Todd Stacy, who has the day off. On the program, we'll talk Justice Matters with Bureau of Pardons and Parole's Director Cam Ward. We'll also talk to Joe Borg, Director of the Alabama Securities and Exchange Commission, about protecting investment and finances. And Alabama Hospital Association President and CEO Dr. Don Williamson joins us to talk about conditions of Alabama hospitals and also COVID-19 updates. But first, a new facility has opened near Uniontown, located in what was once the Perry County Correctional Facility. It's now the Bureau of Pardons and Parole's Reentry Education Program, or PREP Center. It's designed to help former inmates who are returning to society once they finish their sentences.
Not only are we assuring that Alabama remains a safe place to live, but we also are doing the right things by these men and women, transitioning them back to normal life. These folks will receive all the proper help to take these next steps in life and avoid returning to the correctional facility.
What we're looking at is we can't just build larger prisons and warehouse people. What we have to do is we have to get people ready to re-enter society so that they can be productive citizens, so that they can become a part of the tax-paying base and they can build strong families. And that's good. That's a win-win for everyone.
Governor Ivey praised the Bureau and lawmakers for making this center a reality, which will bring relief to portions of Alabama's justice system. Another aspect of this process takes place once a month as the Alabama Reentry Commission gathers to discuss ways to help people leaving correctional facilities. Capitol Journal's Karen Goldsmith has more in this report.
Having a state-issued ID is one of the critical success tools for inmates being released from prison.
As I tell my staff, it's the face of Alabama. You can't rent a car, you can't buy a car, you can't rent a house, you can't open a checking account, you can't do anything without an ID card or a driver's license. So that is how critically important it is. And for these populations leaving incarceration or rehabilitation centers, the opportunity to get to them before they're released
is a project of the Alabama Department of Corrections and the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, also known as ALEA.
Department of Corrections local facilities will make calls to our local driver's license office, and they may have someone that has money, maybe getting out soon, would like to get their driver's license, and they'll bring them into our offices, and we will service them as any other customer.
At this month's Alabama Reentry Commission meeting, they heard from ALEA's driver's license division chief about what they are doing and plan to do.
So persons prior to or maybe in work release that are preparing to re-enter into society, they can visit one of our offices and get their driver's license. They can take their road test, whatever they need to do to be successful when they leave incarceration.
Now they are working to deploy their mobile testing units to the prisons.
It rolls up, it's a minivan, and we pull out these big cases, and they set up tables and computers, and as long as we have internet, we can provide services to them.
And the cost?
$36.25 for a 4-year driver's license or an 8-year ID card.
He shares that getting the proper documents, a birth certificate and social security card to get the IDs is a challenge for some people, but it's a bigger challenge for those who are in prison.
I know that folks incarcerated, there's a number of them that are victims of identity theft because they've been away from society. People have taken advantage of using their name and their information, and they're coming out with the deck stacked against them because someone's used their identity. And that's ALEA's driver's license. We are the guardians of your identity. We want to protect it. We want to make sure the person in front of us is the person in our system. So that's why we ask for these documents.
For Capitol Journal, I'm Karen Goldsmith.
More support in the state's reentry program comes in the form of House Bill 66 passed during the regular session. Bureau of Pardons and Parole's Director Cam Ward says it gives the Reentry Commission more help moving forward.
At the end of this year, one of the things I would like to see, and this is something we'll have to collaborate on, is to come up with a series of concrete proposals that we can offer as policy that we all agree on. Doesn't necessarily have to be a bill, but just general areas we'd like to see the legislature focus on with regard to reentry and what we can do to advocate for some of those issues. Not necessarily getting to the nitty-gritty details, we'll leave that to the legislature, but maybe things that we can all collaborate on, saying someone's coming back into society, what can we do to make this a better reentry so we can knock that recidivism rate down.
In other Alabama news, Alabama is one of many states adjusting to help coming down from Washington, D.C. in the form of American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, funds. State leaders have said another aid package will come down later this year, and many are glad Alabama will once again see some economic relief.
And we want that money to be put to use to be able to put shots in arms, to provide health care, workforce development, skills training, to remediation for our children who are going to be in need of more educational help, given the fact that this pandemic has made them study at home and broadband. So look, I think that the fact that we have the American Rescue Plan on one hand, and just November we passed in Congress the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which will give another big boost to Alabama. Over $5 billion for roads and bridges, $100 million for broadband. I look forward to working with the state and making sure that we have an equitable distribution of those resources.
State lawmakers say a special session will be called so the legislature can determine the use of that additional money. Now, coming up, we recently sat down with Cam Ward, director of the Bureau of Pardons and Paroles, to talk about reentry efforts and other items related to the state justice system. That interview when we return.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online at video.aptv.org. Capital Journal episodes are also available on APTV's free mobile app. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page. And you can listen to past episodes of Capital Journal when you're driving or on the go with Capital Journal podcasts. Keep up with what's happening with Capital Journal.
And welcome back. We're now joined by the director of the Alabama Bureau of Pardons and Paroles, Cam Ward. Mr. Ward?
Randy, thanks for having me back on.
Good to see you. Good to be back. Let me ask you this. Your department is busy. You're also a part of the state justice system, if you will.
Yes.
A lot of people, when I told them that we were going to have you, were thinking, oh, the director of corrections. No, you're not the director of corrections.
No.
It's pardons and paroles. Give me a brief overview of what that department does actually, sir.
So the Bureau of Pardon and Parole actually handles people once they've left the correctional system. We have roughly 44,000 people that are on either probation or parole that we oversee throughout the state of Alabama. Our job is to make sure you don't go back to prison. So that, in simple, short terms, that's what we do. But yeah, we're totally separate from the Department of Corrections.
But you do work with them. You're closely connected in what you do for the state of Alabama.
Yes, they're very good partners of ours. We work closely with Commissioner Ham and his staff and the other criminal justice agencies in the state, in addition to Department of Mental Health, Veterans Affairs, DHR, other agencies that are we kind of collaborate together on the entire criminal justice system, and that includes the courts too.
Speaking of the criminal justice system, there's an event happening this week that you're going to be a part of. It's the reopening of a facility in Perry County. Tell me a little bit more about that, sir.
Well, Perry County is a former prison in Uniontown, Alabama. It's a facility that for years they've tried to sell, the state's tried to buy. It's never really worked out. It was built in 2006, and Department of Corrections for years looked at buying it, and they could never make it work. Pardon and Parole, we stepped up and said, what if we bought it and turned it into a reentry center? This will be the first time we've done this in Alabama. We have a residential reentry center. Right now we have reentry programs in about 14 counties around the state, where you come in and get drug rehabilitation, mental health therapy. You come in and get job training now. We've started that. Those 14 programs service about 500 people. Perry County will double that number by itself, but it will be also residential. So it'll be people who are already on parole that can go in, get substance abuse treatment, mental health treatment, as well as job training programs, That combined reduces recidivism. That's our number one mission job in partner parole, and that is, how do we reduce the 30% recidivism? How do we cut that down? Get someone a job, deal with the underlying issue, you solve the recidivism problem.
Is this the first time a project like this has happened in Alabama?
This is the first time you've had one this big in Alabama. In fact, we've never had a residential program like this in Alabama. So we're very excited. We think it's going to do a lot of good, and also we think it's going to be a blueprint going forward so that we can spread this same program around the state. Again, the goal is what? Public safety. How do we complement ALEA? How do we complement DOC? How do we complement the courts? How do we complement them in reducing crime? And the best way to do that on the recidivism side, our jurisdiction is provide them a job and help them deal with their underlying issue. It reduces the chance of them going back to prison.
Speaking of which, are there any other projects like this in the works for the state of Alabama?
We're working on other day reporting centers, DRCs we call them, in the 14 counties. We want to expand that. We provide these centers where people are on parole and they're high risk and they have the potential of recidivating. What we do is we provide the mental health, the drug treatment, job training. I want to expand that over the entire state. I'm telling you, it works. I've seen it over and over. Get someone a good paying job, help them deal with their addiction or mental illness, and they just don't go back to prison. It works. So yes, we're looking at this on smaller levels, but we don't have anything as big as Perry County planned.
Now, the prison system has been under scrutiny for years, dealing with Alabama's prison system, the prisons throughout the state. Pardons and paroles, the Bureau has also been watched, if you will. Since you've been in the department, in your position now as director, how have things changed? Are things changing, or have you come in to see improvements being made? What is the status of how things are looking with your Bureau right now as we speak?
It's a pendulum agency. It has swung over the years. So I'm actually the 5th director in 6 years they've had. So they've had a spotty leadership as far as long-term stability. They've needed more long-term stability. So that's been one goal of mine, is provide stability. But what I think we've done that's good is we're focusing more and more on the reentry aspect. And that's the job of the Bureau of Pardon and Parole. How do we make sure your reentry to society is successful? And even though we're the second largest law enforcement agency in the state, and law enforcement is a very important part of our job, this reentry and making sure people don't go back to prison or don't commit a crime again, in my opinion, is the biggest part of our mission. And I think refocusing our efforts and resources on reentry has made a huge improvement for our agency. Now, that couldn't have been possible without the legislature. For the last 2 years, the legislature has been great in providing us the resources we need to carry out those programs. Allowed us to do Perry County, allowed us to expand our DRCs, expand more programming for those who need help getting back on their feet. I think that by itself speaks a lot for the direction our agency's heading in.
Has it been tough formulating plans of direction of where to go to help install new improvements within your Bureau?
It is tough. I mean, anytime you have an agency that has over 800 employees, it's like turning an aircraft carrier. It doesn't happen slowly. Or it doesn't happen fast. It happens very slowly. It doesn't happen overnight. And so I feel like we've been successful at that. It is tough at times, but that's just the nature of any agency that size. However, I will say the staff and the people that work out there have been very enthusiastic about carrying out that mission. And that makes it all worthwhile when you see that aspect of it.
Anything else that comes to mind that you would like to see put into play for your Bureau to see more improvements down the line, sir?
For years when I was in the legislature, I always talked about criminal justice reform. And I still am a believer in it. I always will be. And I was then and I am now. But I will say that one aspect that's never been totally discussed as much is the aspect of reducing recidivism and what you can do to help someone get back on their feet. 95% of people in the American correctional system today eventually get out, whether they EOS, which is end of sentence, or they get parole. What do we want them to look like when they get out? I want them to be productive members of society. I want them to not be a public safety threat. A lot of times we overlook that when we talk about criminal justice. We should talk about that more because that's something that's easy for both Republicans, Democrats, and independents to get behind. It's a no-brainer, helping people get on their feet. So that is something I'm going to look at going forward. We're going to continue harping on that, but I really hope more lawmakers get on board with that idea.
You mentioned helping people get back on their feet. Those people who you're helping have family members on the outside of facilities wanting to help them as well too. Are there any ways that citizens can help out the Bureau in terms of helping those who are trying to leave facilities to re-enter the the world, if you will?
Yeah, and I think that's why we need to continue expanding services. And a lot of times what I've noticed is a lot of family members who have loved ones who are coming out don't realize that service is available. The Department of Veterans Affairs, another great partnership program that they provide to other agencies. They have a lot of services for former veterans. Veterans who are in prison, who are coming out, there's a lot of services available to them. We need to continue to expand and educate people as to the services that are out there for them, and the job training to make sure that these families and their loved ones can find a proper placement so that they are productive members of society. So I think there's a lot we can do to help the families. If I had to say we had one shortfall, that would be the area. We're just not educating people enough as to what services are there and available to them.
Now, a lot of work that's been done in the state of Alabama recently, through government, if you will, has been due to some funding coming down from the federal government, the ARPA funds. Is your bureau utilizing, have they been introduced any funding from ARPA?
We received some ARPA funding, but it's not a lot, mainly because it's hard to, we have what I call the ongoing programs, not just one-time building or one-time programming. So Perry County, for example, was general fund dollars used from the state budget. Those are state dollars. We get some ARPA funding, mainly in the area of where we came up short in certain hygiene areas, cleaning areas, that kind of stuff. But our ARPA funding amount is not nearly as much as other agencies, mainly because we just can't use it as much.
Now, you mentioned the legislature. We've touched on them a few times already in our discussion. You happen to be a former legislator yourself, both houses, House and the Senate. That experience, which wasn't that long ago, how does it help you in your position today with the Bureau? And how does it help you to understand what your former, some are still there that were there when you were there, former lawmakers are going through in terms of helping to make sure that your department gets what they need, that the State Department of Justice gets what it needs, and you can work together moving forward to help the state? It's
been a great help, just having those relationships. We've had the caucuses out at our offices meet. We've had just literally a month ago, while session was still going on, with the House Democrat caucus meet here at our day reporting center in Montgomery. So those relationships have been they've been very helpful, because my former colleagues they've been super to us. They ask a lot of questions, a lot of times too on things that maybe not deal with pardon and parole, but we still have those relationships that I value and treasure greatly. But I've also noticed they really want to engage. And because a lot of us serve together, that's helped a lot. We can talk and have a frank conversation. I served in the House in the minority, and I served in the Senate in the majority, so I've been on both sides. And but it's been great to have those conversations again. But also, I see a lot of interest, and the budget process has played that out, of a lot of people who really want to be engaged in what we're doing. And I'm very thankful for that. And so I think that's helped us a lot on the budget and legislation side.
And conversely, within your Bureau, you can help people understand what lawmakers are experiencing when they have these topics and these proposals.
Yeah, it's very different, because a lot of folks who've worked in the Bureau or in any other executive agency, if you've never had the experience on the legislative side, it's hard to explain. You go, well, that may happen, it may not. There's not a logic behind it, it just does. And so that's been that's been an experience, but I think our Bureau's done very well in working with the legislature here recently, and I'm proud of that.
Now, there have been some changes that were already in effect before you became the director. And moving forward, has it been seamless for you in moving forward with the Bureau of Pardons and Parole, sir?
One change is a lot of people assume that the Bureau of Pardon and Parole actually decides who gets in and gets out of prison. We don't. The board, there's still the 3-member board that's appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate that actually determines, who gets paroled and who doesn't. And there's a committee that nominates those the governor picks from. It's a convoluted process. But the one challenge I've had is actually in a law I voted on in favor of in 2019, is that the director of the Bureau of Pardon and Parole does not work for the board. And that used to be the case, where the director always worked for the board, answered to the board. We're actually separate now. We work together though, hand in hand, same building, we provide staff. That's been an interesting challenge, not because of the board or because of us, but because you have to have relationships where all of us get along together. If you have a director and the board that don't like each other, don't personally like each other, you could have a very rough and bumpy situation, but we haven't had that. And I've been very fortunate that we had the relationships where we're allowing the board to do their work, we support them while at the same time we do our work, and they support us.
Now, you mentioned this earlier as well too, mental health concerns, which is a big topic in various entities around the state and around the country. And I know the new facility in Perry County is going to be one that's going to be multidimensional. How has it been working with mental health, not only with the people who may be inside facilities, those who are trying to get out of the facilities, and their families? Have you seen that working relationship with mental health probably grow exponentially in the last few years?
There's no question, and I have to compliment some of the legislators again, Representative Ledbetter, for example, who's been advocating for more funding for mental health. The crutch of the criminal justice system and some of the problems we have is mental health. Deal with mental health, and a lot of other problems are a lot easier to fix. And so we've had a great partnership, Commissioner Boswell and her staff, and I think we'll continue to have that. But I will say this, the more resources we invest in mental health, the more money we put into the programming, the better off we are in criminal justice. We've seen a lot of changes there. I think the Commissioner's doing a great job advocating for more resources, advocating for more services. But I think a lot of people, mental health traditionally has always been out of sight, out of mind. I don't see it, I don't care about it. When in reality, mental health treatment is actually the basis for so many other problems in our society. We fix that, you fix a lot of other issues.
Just a few moments left, and I'm glad you mentioned that, looking ahead for more things and other things to do. Is there anything else you want to mention that the Bureau is looking into doing, and maybe people should be aware of, and maybe people should take note of and just pay attention to?
Well, we have a lot of work to do in educating people on the services that we provide, and that's on us, and we can do a better job. I will say, though, there's one thing we could do more of. We need to do more of the substance abuse treatment. We need to do more of cooperating with other agencies and the private sector. We've started entering into contracts with the private sector to provide job training. If we can do more of that and continue doing a better job of bringing our partners like the legislature with us to do that, I guarantee you we can reduce that recidivism rate greatly in Alabama.
Director Cam Ward of the Bureau of Pardons and Paroles, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks for having me back.
I almost want to call you representative and senator because those were part of your
I've been called a lot worse, so it's not bad.
Okay, we won't do that. Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Thank you.
And Capitol Journal, we'll be right back.
You're watching Alabama Public Television.
And welcome back. The Alabama Securities and Exchange Commission has a job of making sure investments and financial rewards are protected for citizens of the state of Alabama. Joining us now to talk about the Alabama SEC is Director Joe Borg. Director Borg, so good to see you.
A pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Now, let me just clear one thing right off the top. When I said SEC, I'm quite sure there are some people at home thinking, oh, we're talking football, we're talking spring training, we're talking Alabama, we're talking Auburn, we're talking Georgia, Florida. No, this is a different SEC.
It is. Now, I will tell you, anytime I go to a party and somebody introduces me as director of the SEC, the first thing I get is, how do I get football tickets? I go, I'm sorry, I'm not that SEC. And it's like, you can see the disappointment. So we're the other SEC, Securities Exchange Commission for Alabama.
An important entity for the state.
Well, yes, we certainly police the entire investment space. We're here to protect everybody in Alabama that does business in the financial sector. And if you consider that just about everybody in Alabama has either a mutual fund or a 401k or an IRA account or a Roth IRA, these are all things that fall under our jurisdiction to police, to make sure that people are being protected, disclosures are being made, nobody's being ripped off. And if they are, then we actually have the ability to go into court and prosecute.
So you don't have a spread offense or a 5-stack defense, but you're just as if that much more important, because you're dealing with people's property, people's investments, people's money.
Well, we do have defense and offense, but it's on the financial sector. Unfortunately, not on the football field. We'll leave that to the coaches.
So how long have you been with the SEC, sir?
Since 1994. So I've been there a while, going on 28, 29 years. We were a small agency back then, probably 12, 13 people, and we were about 60 now. And our range has expanded. Certainly, we handle registrations and licensing of the broker dealers and anybody that wants to do business with somebody in Alabama where they say, give me some money, I'll invest it for you and make you a profit or give you interest or a dividend. They have to have a license. So we've got about 180,000 of them that we license on an annual basis from all over the world practically. And then there's like 7,000 mutual funds we have to keep track of, all the investment advisors, exemptions, and then the fraudsters, the Ponzi schemes, the pyramid schemes, the Bernie Madoffs. Yeah, we have them here too in Alabama, unfortunately.
And we were talking earlier, in fact, you meet with national leaders every day to talk about things that are happening that Alabama residents may not know about, that should know about.
Now, interestingly enough, our office is one of the leaders as securities regulators in the country. Alabama has led many multi-jurisdictional cases. You know, the old movie, The Wolf of Wall Street case, that actually originated out of Alabama. They turned it into a movie. Boiler Room was another movie. That one had Ben Affleck and Vin Diesel in it. That was a case that originated out of Alabama. But right now what we're concentrating on is cybersecurity attacks that come in from foreign governments and those who are trying to take advantage of the turmoil because of what's going on over in Europe.
And the internet has played or is playing a more prominent role in people doing business and people doing investments. Things that happen around the world on the other side of this planet can and do affect people here in Alabama.
Randy, most of the frauds we have are actually coming in from outside the United States when it comes in the crypto space. You know, look, everybody's seen these crypto millionaires, you know, made a lot of money. And so you can go on the web anytime and you're going to get a pitch about, you know, invest with this or buy this new coin or whatever it is. The unfortunate truth is most folks put their money up, turn it into cryptocurrency, and then it's gone. The one thing that's important that everybody has to realize in any of those ideas of give me your money and I'll going to get you make money, there has to be licensed and registered. So the first thing anybody ought to do is check with us. You know, you can just call us at our 1-800-222-1253 number and say, hey, I saw this on the net, or I got this call, or I got this email, or whatever. And if these people aren't licensed or aren't registered, hold on to your wallet. They're about to take it. So there's a lot of that going on out there. So we spend quite a bit of time looking at the internet scams and frauds that people, you know, are susceptible to.
Cryptocurrency, by the way, isn't something tangible like this desk, like this paper that you can actually touch. Is it not? It's something that people deal with online.
Well, think about it though. If you consider any dollar bill, just an American dollar bill, you know, there's a series of numbers on there. Now the paper isn't worth a whole lot, but what it represents is money, of course, and you can go spend it. Cryptocurrency is a digital type of currency, and I think it's here to stay. Now, whether it's Bitcoin or something else, I don't know. But if you think about it, my paychecks, maybe even yours, get direct deposit. I never see it. And then I pay with a credit card or a check. I never see the dollar bills anymore. So cryptocurrency is digital currency, but there's a big difference. My dollar bill and your dollar bill is backed by the US government. Cryptocurrency is backed by, I don't know, somebody who's willing to buy it. And that's why it's so volatile. It's not something you would do, you know, it's not a savings account. It's not an investment account in generally. Now, if you want to play in the cryptocurrency market, make sure you understand what you're doing and who you're dealing with. So many frauds out there, so many con men, so many scams out in the cryptocurrency field these days.
And again, like you just said, contact your agency if you have any questions about this.
You know, you can go to our website, and I know we're going to show that up in a little while. Mm-hmm. There is information on there. Look, you may not even know the difference between a stock and a bond, but we can help you with that. And you may be more sophisticated and want to look at options and trading and things like that. We can help you with that. And if you just want to get a basic feel for what's out there and what the scams look like, every one of our cases is listed on our website. So if you just want some light reading on how we did this case or that case, or this recent case we just had where this guy set up 100 different fake cryptocurrency websites, which we went after and shut it down. But you know, by the time we get to it, somebody's already put their money in it. And unfortunately, that money goes through dollar bills to cryptocurrency, off somewhere in that internet space, and is probably sitting in some East Russian bank somewhere, all because you thought you were dealing with somebody up the street.
And that is also a big problem. Scammers coming in from other countries,
All the
trying
time.
to steal from people around the country, especially here in Alabama too.
You know, the internet's like a big city. It's got good neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods. The trouble is you don't know where they are. And just because you get an email, oh, look, one of the big scams that's going on now is you may get an email and think it's from your bank. But if you look real carefully, there's probably one letter off. And if you start making a deposit to that, that money never went to your bank account. It just went off to somewhere in Nigeria, Spain, Romania, Russia, China. Could be anywhere. And the chances of getting that back is pretty slim, sometimes none. So you've got to be really careful. You've got to do your due diligence. Anything on the internet is not regulated. You have to be careful. And especially if you're not doing it yourself. You know, one of the dangerous things of these hot links, they'll say, hey, we're your bank, we're your mortgage company, we're your investment advisor, whatever it may be. You know, click here to see your such and such. When you click that, you may think you're going to your broker or whatever it might be, but you may be off somewhere else in somebody who's got computers and a boiler room operation, and there's folks trying to figure out how they can get your passwords, your ID. Oh, you know, we're ready to take your deposit, but let's make sure it's you. Give me your password. Why would my bank ask me for my password if they've already got it and I just put it in? But little things like this, sometimes it's just common sense. But we're in a hurry, it's busy, and we get started and we go, oh my goodness, I got to take care of this bill. Just make sure it's going to the right place. Sometimes it's better off to stop, call your bank or broker or whoever it is and say, did you send me an email? A lot of times you might find out they didn't. One thing's real important. Government, banks, finance companies, things like that, never ever just send you something blank and say, make this money payment or we're coming after you, or you know, we're going to arrest you if you don't do this, or you didn't pay your taxes. And they never ask for money in cryptocurrency, you know, cash cards, or go down to your local Walmart and mail us some money. No, that's not the way it works. Those are all red flags of potential scams.
And I'm willing to bet that a lot of scammers prey on people not paying attention to those intimate little details to take advantage of them to steal what they've earned.
Sure. So it's either a scare tactic, or they get you when you're so busy and you've got to take care of this because it looks like it's so important, and you don't pay attention to the detail. Who is it? What is it? Is it really mine? Do I really owe it? I know we've seen a lot about, you didn't show up for jury duty, we're going to arrest you if you don't pay us, you know, $500 in gift cards. Does that even make sense? It doesn't. And so sometimes you got to think about it. And people are busy these days and they don't think about it real quickly. And it's the fear factor. It's either a fear factor or a greed factor that's going to get you in trouble. You know, if these guys are making multi-millions of dollars on crypto, why cannot I? But remember, there's a few of them and there's a ton of other folks who lost money. So you got to be careful.
I'll switch topics really quickly if I can. Something else that we spoke on earlier, the metaverse, something that has been floating around the last few weeks, months now, that a lot of people are also paying attention to. What is the metaverse and how can it also affect those who invest?
The metaverse is a virtual reality space. And we've watched TVs with folks wearing headsets and whatnot, and they're in a whole new universe. Yeah, that's what we're talking about, this metaverse. Facebook recently changed their name to Meta. There's a lot of money to be made in this area because people like to get away from things, so to speak. We just issue an order with regard to a virtual casino. Now, the reason we issued the order is because you buy into it with cryptocurrency. You get what's called NFTs, non-fungible tokens. You'll see that allowed. That's being done quite a bit in the art world and whatnot, and you own these NFTs. But you got to pay real money for it. And they're going to promise you a return because when they make a profit on the casino, you're going to get money back. Trouble is, it's out of Cyprus, this one. We have no idea who the owners are. They all have avatars. That's their, pseudo identity in the multiverse, in the universe out there. And you can have all these different universes that are out there, and they all interplay with each other. But if you don't understand it, why would you put your money in something that you don't know who it is, where they are, how they're located, only on the promise that if you put this in, turn it into crypto, send it to me, we'll send you $80,000 at the end of the year. That's like somebody walking up to me as I'm coming out of one of the stores and saying, you don't know me, but if you give me $5,000 today, I'll meet you back here in a year and I'll give you $50,000. Are you going to do it? I'm certainly not. I don't even know who these folks are.
So it's one of those instances where you should proceed with caution.
Oh, do your due diligence and homework and know who you're dealing with. Am I saying you shouldn't invest in things? No, but if you don't understand what you're investing in, maybe it's not for you.
Especially when it comes to the metaverse.
The metaverse is a whole new internet universe, if you will. Think of it as Internet 2.0. Now, instead of just words and typing and whatnot and email, you'll have that plus the visual effects as well. Yeah, I think it's going to be a big area over the years. A lot of folks are spending a ton of money developing it. But, anytime you have something new, that's where the fraudsters go. The best frauds are ripped right out of the headlines. And as you see, metaverse to expand, crooks are going to go there. So you have to be very diligent in what you do. Check it out with us if we can help.
Wanted to ask you about a topic I heard about through your agency about this issue called pig butchering. Now, I know, again, we're talking with the SEC. We're not talking SEC football or other sports. We're not talking farm-related instances per se. But there is another topic called pig butchering. First of all, what is it and why?
So, suppose one day you're looking at your phone or your email and you hear, hey, Linda, we're not going to make dinner. And you go, I don't know this person. And you, I'm sorry, I think you got the wrong person. Oh, I'm really sorry. Or, hey, Jack, that investment we just put money in looks like it's going to pay off. It's like, I got somebody else's email. I got somebody else's communication. No, this is a plant. They want to start a communication. They want to start ability of getting you involved in a conversation. And so what happens in the pig butchering, what we call it, is that we start this relationship and we start talking, oh, sorry, wrong email, but hey, by the way, I'm so-and-so and you're so-and-so, and you start chatting over the media, social media, and you get to know them a little bit, they get to know you, and you don't realize that they're actually setting you up, fattening you up for a slaughter down the road. And what happens somewhere along the line, the conversation talks, oh, what do you do? Well, I'm in crypto, the guy on the other end says, or I'm in such and such. And then they may even set up a video chat, and they'll have actors and stock footages and things like that. So you think you know who you're dealing with. Eventually, as that relationship develops, that conversation continues. Maybe it's romantic, maybe it's not, doesn't make a difference. They will start talking to you about, oh yeah, I've been investing in this particular crypto over here in Europe or wherever they may be. Yeah, we're making good money on it. Maybe you ought to get into it. And they will give you an application, or they will tell you where to go on the net, and you look it up, and sure enough, these folks are starting to make money. And you start putting money into it, and they'll give you fake accounts to show that you're making money. They're fattening you up. All your money's going in there. And someday down the road, you're going to say, let me get my money out. And you're going to get an email that says, yes, you've got this account with, $1 million in it. Oh, by the way, you got to pay $10,000 in taxes now you got to send another $10,000 in crypto. And once you do that, you never hear from them again. That application, those websites may actually be owned by the person who you first started when you got that email that said, hey, Linda, I'm going to be late. Or, hey, don't forget to meet me at the bar. And that's how it all starts. So the pig butchering comes from the fact is that it takes time, sometimes months, to fatten you up, get you to the point where your money's going in through crypto or investing in crypto through some sort of application. And then when you're ready to get it on out, it just ain't there and everything disappears.
Director Joe Borg of the Alabama Securities Exchange Commission. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
A pleasure. Thank you very much for
having us.
We'll have to do this
again.
Anytime. We're always available.
Thank you, sir. and Capital Journal will be right back.
You can watch past episodes of Capital Journal online anytime at Alabama Public Television's website, aptv.org. Click on the Online Video tab on the main page. You can also connect with Capital Journal and link to past episodes on Capital Journal's Facebook page.
And welcome back. Joining me now is Dr. Don Williamson, the president and CEO of the Alabama Hospital Association. Dr. Don, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Randy.
Of course, you deal with healthcare in the state of Alabama. Your history with it goes back a number of years before you became president and CEO of the Alabama Hospital Association. Kindly explain to the people, number one, what is the AHA and your extent of history in dealing with Medicare?
Well, the Alabama Hospital Association is an organization of hospitals in Alabama. In fact, almost all of them are members of the association. We have the opportunity to work with our hospitals to try to improve access to health care for our citizens, to make sure that hospitals are financially able to survive, and to try to advance the ability of hospitals to meet the needs of citizens in the community. And Medicaid, as you point out, is a very critical component of our financing structure and of our healthcare system in Alabama. Well over 1 million people in Alabama are on Medicaid. And years ago, it's been now more than 6, almost 7 years ago, I had the privilege of working for a few years while I was state health officer to try to help Medicaid. And that helped me, at least, understand how important and how complicated that system is, and what a real opportunity it provides us to provide health care to our citizens. There's still 300,000+ people in Alabama who are uninsured, and a substantial number of those could be covered if Alabama is able at some point to expand Medicaid. Also, not only does Medicaid expansion, for example, improve the financial status of hospitals, most importantly, it improves the health outcomes of citizens. In states that have expanded Medicaid, they have lower infant mortality rates, they have lower cancer death rates, they diagnose cancers earlier, and people simply do better when they have access to health care.
Speaking of access to health care, what would you say is the state of hospitals in Alabama? I know we're covering a wide state. Hospitals are everywhere, but what would you say is the state of hospitals in Alabama today?
We in Alabama now face what I would describe as an existential crisis. And that crisis is the workforce issues. We have lost in the United States about 20 to 25% of the healthcare workforce due to COVID. It's estimated that it'll be 2025 before we get back to our pre-COVID levels of staffing in Alabama, in hospitals around the country. In Alabama, I've had the opportunity over the last few weeks to meet with pretty much hospitals from around the state, and we literally have thousands of vacancies for nurses in Alabama hospitals. And it's not just nurses. We have vacancies of everything from nurses to social workers to the people who serve meals, who work in the cafeteria, respiratory therapists, physical therapists. There's almost not a job in a hospital for which there is not a shortfall. So for individuals who may be contemplating what they want to do with their life, healthcare is going to be a real opportunity, and it's a desperate need, and our ability to address that shortage over the next several months and years is going to be critically important to the survival of our healthcare system in Alabama.
We've documented over the years here at APT about how some colleges in the state have gone with incentive programs for those who are in the medical field or medical understudies to actually stay in state, right, to stay and help shore up those numbers. Is that still in?
Yeah, I mean, as we're looking at our shortages, we've made in the association healthcare and the healthcare workforce our priority for the coming year, and it'll probably be our priority for many years going forward. And so, for example, we've got hospitals that are already partnering with two-year schools to increase the output of nurses,
to work in the community. We've got hospitals working on an apprenticeship program to try to increase healthcare workers in the system. We're looking now at every imaginable system. We're going to be working with education on ways to increase the input into the system. And not only do we have to increase the number of people coming into the system, then what we have to do is figure out how to keep them in Alabama and how to adequately compensate them in Alabama so that they'll stay here.
Now, one of the things that was mentioned during both the regular session that we just finished and the special session was talking about the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan funds coming to states, including Alabama. There were topics about how to get that to work for hospitals and the medical and health care system for the state of Alabama. We also talked about how in many places, not just rural areas, but urban areas, you were seeing hospitals that in some cases were almost shutting their doors.
Yeah, and this is, it's a really a challenge. First, I would be remiss if I didn't thank the governor's office, the legislature, for the ARPA funds that came to hospitals, especially out of the special session. There was $40 million for all hospitals and $30 million for rural hospitals, and certainly that $40 million is going to go to help meet some of the losses, some of the financial expenses that hospitals have dealt with due to COVID. The reality, however, is there's not going to be enough money to make hospitals whole. There's not going to be enough money to make anybody whole from the COVID pandemic. The challenge that hospitals have faced, both in urban and rural areas, it goes back to staffing. Hospitals, in many cases, were unable they lost staff. We were understaffed to begin with. We had this mass exodus of people. A lot of those were people who were nearing retirement, who, when given the opportunity, said, you know what, I really don't want to put my family at risk, myself at risk, I'm going to retire. So they fell out of the workforce. Some of them were nurses and other healthcare workers who could make more money as travelers, going to other states to work. So hospitals suddenly had fewer people to provide service. So in some cases, hospitals scaled back what they could do. We had hospitals that delayed elective procedures, that put off non-emergent hips, things like that. That reduced the ability of the hospital to respond. Then we had hospitals that, in order to stay open, to meet the demand they had for intensive care unit coverage, taking care of people in the ED, not just with COVID, but with strokes, heart attacks, motor vehicle accidents, everything else, they went out and they hired staff, some of these travelers. We have hospitals that are paying millions of dollars more a month in cost than they ever have before, and they're not being reimbursed for that by third-party payers. That's going to have a serious financial impact on hospitals going forward. And so the way you have to fix that is you have to fix the workforce issue. That's a fundamental long-term solution. Now, ARPA funds are important. They will help, if you will, provide us the opportunity to bring some stability to the system. And again, we recognize there's never going to be enough ARPA funds to make everybody whole, but we want to work with our hospitals to get them to a place where they can be stable, where that we can begin this long recovery process. And I think the important thing here is this is not going to be something that's done in 6 months. It's not going to be something that's done in a year. We're going to be recovering from the impact of COVID for many years, and that's assuming we don't have another surge that disrupts the system.
I want to touch on that in a little bit, but I also want to talk to you about part of your mission statement with the Alabama Hospital Association is representation. That also goes with something you just mentioned, dealing with lawmakers in terms of helping to get what you need. Do you find it helpful when you talk to some lawmakers and they can relate to some of the issues dealing with hospitals and shortages in their own communities? They can come back and tell you, we understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that is so very helpful, is when our leadership, our legislative leadership, the executive leadership, when they're able to talk with local hospital leaders about what's going on in their community. All politics is local, and it is extraordinarily helpful for legislators to understand what the dynamics are in their hospital, to understand what needs to be done to improve access in the community. I mean, that's one of our biggest problems. It's not just urban hospitals, it's not just rural hospitals. COVID to me demonstrated the need for a integrated system of healthcare in a way that nothing else ever had. Yes, most of the COVID patients were taken care in larger urban centers, especially those who were most ill, who needed a ventilator, who maybe needed more intensive care. But without those rural hospitals, without the rural hospitals who could take care of patients and provide the care they needed, those urban hospitals would have been overwhelmed and the system wouldn't have survived. So the survival of both the urban hospitals and the rural hospitals are both critical if we're going to continue to ensure high quality health care for our citizens.
We've mentioned COVID.
Yeah.
It's been over 2 years since it literally spread across the world, and we're still dealing with it in many instances. Perhaps maybe not as bad as it has been, but we're still dealing with it. A couple of news items of COVID came to pass this past week. The first being that there are some spots in the country, in the United States, that have seen some numbers rise due to a different variant of it. And some countries across the world have seen their numbers go up. Hospitals were hammered by this, as we noted, over the past couple of years. Are we concerned? Are there some things we need to be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I mean, look, things are so much better today than they were in January, February, so much better than they were in August, September, either with Delta or Omicron. But it would be naive to believe we have beaten the virus and the virus is gone. BA2 is out there. It's a subvariant of Omicron. It is more infectious. So what we do at the association, what the health department's doing, is we're monitoring our positivity rate. Now, currently our positivity rate's very low. It was 3.1% this morning. Now, being a little concerned, it got down to 2.4, it's up to 3.1. That's still in the range of you've got it under control. We're not seeing an increase in cases at this point reported. More importantly, we're not seeing any meaningful increase in hospitalization. We've got 8 to 10 people in the ICU, 8 to 10 people on ventilators. So right now, COVID is not stressing our hospitals. They're still extremely busy with everything else, but it's not COVID. But I think we have to understand this virus will continue to mutate. And it's not so much whether or not this virus causes more disease, it's whether or not that disease overwhelms the healthcare system. We can have an increase in COVID cases, but as long as people aren't getting seriously ill, they're not having to be hospitalized, they're not dying from it, then it doesn't disrupt the healthcare system any more than, say, a flu season would disrupt the healthcare system. Yes, some people will be hospitalized, but we don't overwhelm the system. What we have to be tracking is how much disease are we seeing, but most importantly what we have to be looking at is what is that doing for hospitalizations and what is that doing for the intensive care unit usage, what's it doing for ventilator usage. As long as it's not overwhelming those systems, and as long as people will continue to be vaccinated, will continue to wear their mask whenever that's appropriate, and I know that's a controversial issue, then we have a chance of making through this without maybe another surge.
We have a few moments left, and yes, it is a controversial and timely issue because it came down through the news a couple of days ago that a federal judge out of Florida overturned a mask mandate, basically making mask an optional thing for travel resources, whether it be by bus, by plane. How does that play into how do we move forward?
Well, I mean, I think there's a distinction. There are lots of things that we don't mandate in society that are still good ideas. And so, my take on this is maybe this mandate's gone away. Maybe it will be challenged. I don't know. Whether it's challenged or not, my thought is if it makes sense to wear a mask because either you're immunosuppressed, because you've not been vaccinated, or just because you want to reduce your risk of getting the disease, it's appropriate to wear the mask. If you want to wear the mask, wear the mask. There's no place that it's wrong to wear the mask. So if you're flying, even if not required, you probably want to think about it, maybe wearing a mask. If you're in a large indoor space with a lot of other people and you don't know everybody's vaccine status, it may be appropriate to think about wearing a mask. Just because they're not mandated doesn't mean you still can't make the choice to wear a mask.
One more thing real quickly, still be vigilant of COVID as well as flu, cold, and other.
Yeah, I mean, we're largely through our classic influenza season, but we have seen influenza later in the year, and we have to be very vigilant because we're going to be coming up on fall before we know it, and that's when we could see another increase in COVID. We could certainly see an increase in influenza. So if you haven't been vaccinated against COVID, please think about getting vaccinated, and when it's appropriate to get vaccinated against influenza, get vaccinated against influenza.
Dr. Don Williamson, President, CEO of the Alabama Hospital Association. So good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you.
And Capital Journal will be right back.
The famous goal line stand, one of the most celebrated moments in Alabama sports history. The Tide was leading the 1979 Sugar Bowl when Penn State moved the ball to within 10 inches of the goal line. Barry Krause and Marty Lyons leaped over the pile to stop Nittany Lions running back Mike Gooman and preserve the Tide's victory. The win handed Coach Paul Bear Bryant his 5th national championship.
That does it for this edition of Capital Journal. Be sure to join us next week, Friday, right here on APT for the latest in statewide news and updates. For all of us here at Capital Journal, thanks for joining us. Please stay safe.